Let's do a bit of British politics here, chat. This from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. Title of the video, The Fall of the Lords. Let's take a look at this.
All right, then. So this actually happened last week, but given that we...
I prefer when Dan, Harry, or Bo are on. Yeah, Josh is not bad, though. He's all right.
Just because of the way it's been scheduled, I haven't really had time to talk about this in any great detail, and it is something that deserves, I think, a larger discussion. And I suppose we can start that discussion with how nonchalant the Cabinet Office's post was about this, which is that this is the biggest reform to our Parliament in a generation. This morning, the 7-year-old system of hereditary... 700-year-old,
yes.
Thank you, system of hereditary membership in the House of Lords was abolished. Membership is now earned through public service and merit, not granted by an inheritance.
That's actually rather huge.
More of a, at least melancholy, like a tinge of sadness in doing away with something that has survived for all of these generations going.
I mean, you're not going to get that out of this government. They don't care. And really, haven't they been gunning for the House of Lords like this for ages now? You could joke it had lasted a century from when we adopted democracy, then a woman got involved. Yeah. Kind of missed the Josh Weathersley emote and the Callum Zukov one. I didn't even know they had emotes.
Back, you know, since beyond the Enlightenment, beyond the Renaissance, right back into the medieval era.
I view it in terms of whether it's a good or bad institution. Personally, if I think it's a bad institution, I don't care, I'm happy. But in this case, I think that it has been an institution that has a lot to speak for it.
Yeah. And unfortunately as well, this was in the Labour manifesto. I was meant to get up the actual part of it, but it's in there. They said that they were going to do...
Well, and it's not just being a project of Labour from 2024. This is something that stretches going all the way back to the reforms from the Tony Blair years. The whole thing that made the House of Lords interesting as an outsider was the hereditary portion. Yeah, it was a House chamber that, yeah, a lot of these people had hereditary titles, but those sorts of titles they've been chipped away at for a long, long time. It used to be the titles were inherited with certain types of land ownership. And then at some point, the titles got detached from the land. And now, even if you have a title, doesn't really mean much, does it? And positions in the House of Lords based on merit, who decides that? And what are the criteria? That's what I want to know. I think people attribute a maliciousness to Starmer that doesn't exist. My opinion is he's a puppet who will do as his globalist masters tell him, as long as he gets Ukrainian rent boys, etc. I think you might be onto something there, Kalergi. I mean, granted, Starmer is communist scum. He's had open affiliations for a long time, going back to his uni days, with Marxist and communist groups. He's been an agitator for them. But, much like what Don Corleone said in The Godfather, he's like, Starmer's like Tatalia, and Tatalia's a pimp. There's real power brokers behind him, the Barzinis of the world, the globalist masters, that he does what he's told. And in return, yes, gets his little Ukrainian rent boys, or whatever perks servants of Satan are given access to. It was an institution directly connected to history. They've been giving away titles by the dozens every administration to former House politicians and friends of prime ministers. Yes, and sometimes even prime ministers themselves.
This in the House
has wanted to do this. He's been pushing for a long time. He did have Lords reform when he was in office, but he wasn't able to get the full way to getting rid of the hereditary peers. But sorry.
Well, no, it's just to say that you're absolutely right. There was a compromise that was made which allowed for 92 hereditary peers to continue on, which was a deal made with the Tories at the time. And obviously one of the reasons for this was that Blair identified that the House of Lords, because of the hereditary peers, they were naturally more conservative, not only in party, but in their actual temperament and in their...
They were in the way. And so Blair decided, okay, we will destroy you then. If it has to be by merit, introduce an imperial exam system like in China and require military service and local administrative duty for all members, as was the case in the Roman Senate. I I think a lot of those conditions existed at least a long time ago, but then they just got rid of them. You can only serve so many terms. You have to join the legions, whether or not you can get an officer position by your own merit.
Loyalties as well. And so, naturally, like everything else to do with Blairism, that was simply something that had to be done away with. But because it was in the Labour Manifesto as well, it basically means that it's in alignment with the Salisbury Convention, where the House of Lords can't really block. The peers can't actually block this from happening. They just have to step back and allow the convention to take place. But one of the things that I also
that's
wanted
also a problem.
to talk about with all of this, actually, just to go back to the framing of it here, to talk about service and merit, and obviously it's all being coached more in it being a gradual step to having an entirely elected, a more democratic second chamber. And actually, I just wanted to draw...
They are effectively trying to do to the House of Lords what the Americans did to the United States Senate well over 100 years ago now. Yes, under King George 20 years ago, that was the norm, or 200 plus years ago. It was also the case under Charles I. Oh, I see.
Or a passage from George Orwell on this, where he says in Politics in the English Language, the words democracy, socialism, freedom, patriotic, realistic, justice have each of them several different meanings which cannot be reconciled with one another. In the case of a word like democracy, not only is there no agreed definition, but the attempt to make one is resisted from all sides. It is almost universally felt that when we call a country democratic, we are praising it. And I feel like this type of thinking of basically the way that the word democracy or democratic is kind of just used almost in international language at this point as a synonym of good. Right? If something is democratic, it is naturally good, it is naturally...
I think that needs to change, and there are people changing it even now to where democracy is not necessarily a good thing. You know, the talk about our democracy. That just... You might as well swap it out for our bureaucracy, which is what it really means, the protection of bureaucratic structures in the Western world, manned by globalist elites. But yes, democracy in and of itself is not inherently good. And if anything, as we have seen in the modern era, quite often it is a bad thing. Because it either doesn't exist, it's just a ruse, or the only outcomes you can get out of it are ones that people just don't really want. It's always a choice between the lesser of two evils. And frankly, I think we're all tired of having to choose between the lesser of two evils. And we would like to choose between the greatest of the two goods.
Better than if something is undemocratic or grounded in tradition. And this is really important because this is what we actually see, as Apostolic Majesty points out here, that was kind of the trajectory from the very end of the Edwardian period when Asquith was Prime Minister and David Lloyd George was Chancellor, and when they were trying to put through the People's Budget, the Lords decided that they were going to block it because obviously it was counter to their own conservative landed interests, right, and their own economic interests. And so because of this, Asquith went forward and basically changed it so that at the time before this, the Lords could actually veto legislation. That was put to an end by the Liberals.
But sorry.
Let's see. Tweet reading, David Lloyd George led the charge to emaciate the Lords, only to be undone by a Price for Peerage's scandal. Tony Blair exchanged the bulk of hereditary peers for cronies and donors. The House of Lords only exists now as a testament to corruption, and it's being celebrated.
Just a
yeah,
just a question. So does this mean that the parliament has become a unicameral body from a bicameral one, or not yet?
I'm sorry, I don't actually know what that
It does, yes.
Effectively,
so,
yes.
Bicameral means that it has two different chambers in the legislature. So what Stelios is
I mean,
saying is actually...
if one chamber can't really do anything, can't veto anything, then yes, effectively you've got a unicameral house. That's yeah. I mean, you might as well. The Romans called it cursus honorum cariopath.
I was going to say, which is basically, it makes the
Curse
House
of
of
Honour.
Lords redundant because it needs to be a distinct chamber from the House of Commons. And even though, it might still have the name House of Lords, if both are elected, both are effectively operating the same way. So they're, it's no longer operating in the bicameral way in which our Parliament has operated in for, hundreds of years.
Right.
And so the expertise that the Lords had in refining legislation, which is the main thing that they do in today's Britain, or at least they did, is probably going to be weakened, and it just means that you can have a greater tyranny by the Commons, as I see it. And there have been many criticisms from the Lords of the Commons and the way our democracy works in the first place, which I find interesting, that this seems to align to a greater empowerment of the Commons, because you have people like Lord Hailsham many years ago saying that our political system is basically an elective dictatorship, that as long as you get a majority in the Commons, you can basically act as dictator, and having people in the Lords that...
Yeah, not wrong. I mean, who's going to oppose you? That was kind of the whole point of the House of Commons and the House of Lords, both of them serving as a check on one another, keeping things in balance. Perhaps that's something else that needs to be undone with a Restore Britain government and with a Rupert Lowe as Prime Minister. Give the authority back to the House of Lords. Give veto power back to the Lords. I like the House of Lords practice they got rid of some decades ago, where the Speaker would wear a hat, and they would throw this top hat round they shared when someone needed a hat to speak. Yeah, that does sound a bit silly.
Criticising your use of power isn't always the best thing, but there have been many good and useful voices for the British public coming from the Lords, and in fact I think it's one of the chambers that had previously been less polluted by the corrosive nature of party politics.
It's basically an anti-constitutional move in a sense. Not that it's necessarily that it's against the Constitution, but in the sense that you have less checks on power. You framed it wrongly, but it's that in my mind is a bad thing.
Yeah, and the other thing as well that I would just say with all of this is that I'm not going to defend the House of Lords like it's always been a perfect institution, like it's been beyond corruption. I mean, there are so many examples, not only with the way that King George V threatened to stack it with peers if the Conservatives didn't buckle to what the Liberals wanted back in 1911. But, going right back to times that we think of now as, with more vitalism, when we were truly an incredible country. I think about the Regency crisis with the madness of King George. And, William Pitt the Younger was very clear about making sure that the Regent couldn't just stack the House of Lords with all of his cronies and his appointees and peers. And, okay, fine, so the king and all of these people can't stack the Lords with their peers now, but now all of a sudden just Boris Johnson can do it, though. That's fine.
Keir Starmer can as well, right?
And Keir Starmer can, and all the rest of them. But the problem that we run into...
And keeping it on nebulous standards of merit now, to where that's the only way you can get admitted to the House of Lords. What's to stop them from doing similar schemes to what we've seen before? Just seems like more of the same, even though, and maybe that's the reason. Monumental change, barely a whisper in public, and I guess nothing ever changes. I don't know. I don't fucking know.
It's the fact that, according to YouGov polling, so, I'm not expecting them to be the most honest about anything, but most Britons would support making the House of Lords fully elected. And I would suggest that actually,
what is the point of that?
Though, as I just said, I don't trust YouGov, I don't see there anything really incongruent with public mood on this, especially when the public, like the Lords, like everyone in society, have been inculcated with these more liberal ideals and these feelings of democracy being the highest form of good. I can understand why the public have been turned in this direction, especially as the Lords continued throughout decades to drift more and more into this kind of halfway house where it's not really anything in a true form anymore.
Democracy without checks and balances, or with fewer checks and balances, is not particularly stable. Yeah, no. This is the exact opposite of what Madison was all about.
Right.
When they were drafting the U.S. Constitution, where he was thinking that the states individually are too democratic. They do need extra checks and balances.
Yes, and hence the original setup between Congress and the Senate. The people elected congressmen, but the states, I think it was the state legislatures, were the ones who chose the senators. And that prevailed until, I think it was it late 19th or early 20th century? And then that was changed when progressives came into power. And it was altered to where, no, senators are now elected by the people, same as the Congress. What's the point?
Just going to add that I think it's the complete opposite. I think that the House of Lords should be entirely unelected, because otherwise it's just a repetition of the House of Commons, and therefore it is redundant. It'd be better to have it in an ideal society as a chamber where you can have lots of expertise in various fields. You have, doctors, industrialists, lawyers, people who can...
No, it was the early 20th century. 17th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, direct election of U.S. senators,
wheedle out mistakes and errors and conflicts within legislation and just improve the quality and the intention of it. Of course, we run into difficulties in the modern day because we know that this would be abused, but at the same time, were we to have a restoration of British institutions, I think that a movement in that direction would be much better, because you don't want people who've just been freshly elected into politics shaping legislation necessarily, because you want people with years and years of experience. And you can have the best of both. You can have elected representatives in the Commons representing your interests, whilst people with considerable and long careers in their respective industries in the House of Lords, and these are good counterweights to one another. And that's how the system has worked for hundreds of years, and it's a shame to see it end.
No, I quite agree with you. I mean, I can only think back to the segment that I did last week on abortion, of course, and the House of Lords featured quite heavily in that as well, because even though it went towards the most tragic possible result, the point was that legislation was rushed through the Commons after merely 46 minutes of debate. Now, surely something as seismic as that requires much more discussion and, much more scrutiny.
Precisely why they rushed it through. They didn't want a whole lot of debate, because the longer something like that is debated, the greater the chance it won't get passed. And now you've got effectively, I think, partial birth abortion now, or near as, in the UK. None of the minority population is going to partake in any of that. That's all targeted towards the native white population in Britain. those are the ones that are going to be getting abortions. Especially so that people don't have living reminders that things like rape gangs exist. So that people in power will be able to say, well, if there's so much raping going on, where's the children? Where are they? It's just another way to cover up the massive crimes being committed against the native population by foreign invaders.
And frankly shouldn't have been entertained in the first place, but that's by the by. The point is that also as well, it's, as you say, it's good to have, it would be better to have an entirely unelected chamber, because ultimately once you, and you know, I mean, your idea of experts as well, but even if you have it being amongst those ranks are the hereditary peers, those who are, you know, tied to the land, who have literally, their families haven't moved from their ancestral homes in all of these generations. And in the world of globalization and nomadism, I think that that's actually quite a healthy antidote to it. Another thing as well, of course, is that if you are a member of parliament, it's constantly making false promises, it's constantly laying out red meat to voters, it's constantly having to appeal to this short-termism that comes with general elections and democracy, and having a more educated body above it that doesn't have to take into consideration that, it gives it more chance for long-term planning, for actual a more far-sightedness, I would suggest.
I mean, just look at it at the face of it. It's the House of Lords. It's sort of like a proxy for some of the strongest points of monarchy or, say, dictatorship, is that you have a stable group of people involved in the decision-making process. And of course, I'm not in favour of you know, I want people to be able to choose their government. That's not what I'm saying, but that is what the Commons is for. And
Yes.
you know, these should be complementary, and that's how it was understood for a long time. And I don't think anything has changed. No. It's just that there's a political incentive for the left and the Labour Party to remove these people, and it has been for, you know, since 1997.
No, because they want to eliminate their most natural form of opposition, and that is the landed nobility and the gentry. Because they want the land. They want to seize the land and use it for God only knows what all. Sell it off to BlackRock at a fraction of what it's worth. Or just turn the whole thing into battery farms for migrants and third worlders.
Before.
So now what we see, just as an example, is that one of those set to leave the chamber will be the Duke of Norfolk and Earl of Arundel, and he can trace his peerage all the way back to 1138. And it's like, and that's just gone. It's just gone because the Labour Party willed it so. And bear in mind as well that this is a party that really only won the election because its competitor collapsed. After being one of the worst.
It has no mandate to do these sweeping constitutional changes in sort of objective terms. Sure, it's got an electoral majority.
So like the nobles joining rank with Cromwell during the English Civil War, or the French aristocracy inciting the revolutionaries rather than remaining true to the oaths they made to their king just years prior. Yeah. And who knows, it may... something like this... I should hope that there's some members of the House of Lords that will see this as a slight or an injury against them and will back the strongest horse to defeat Labour in the upcoming elections. I certainly hope so. I don't know, if I were a member of the House of Lords and I saw this happening, I would be seeing what sort of aid and comfort I can give to the opposition. Just to pay out Labour. Just to get them back. I should like to think that they won't take this sort of thing lying down, but there will be consequences later on for Labour. But, on the other hand, the mentality and the behaviour of the cuckold runs very strong in many parts of British politics, and in the West in general.
But they should understand that these sorts of things, they haven't really been given the permission to do it. You know, being the least hated at the time of the election is not an achievement, and it's not a mandate to enact all of the worst excesses of your manifesto.
No, and it certainly
And yet they will make hay while the sun shines.
The more progressive vision of what the Lords can be, if it's more reliant on appointees from former prime ministers, and as Boris Johnson did when he was on his way out of office, and he appointed Charlotte Owen, 30-year-old former advisor, joined the House as Lords as the youngest peer. According to a LinkedIn profile, Baroness Owen started a career as an intern in then Chancellor George Osborne's constituency office, and then she went on to intern for Johnson and as a parliamentary assistant for Alok Sharma and Sir Jake Berry before joining Number 10 as a special advisor. So she spent... Look, I'm not judging her as a person, but there is nothing remarkable about her. There is nothing extraordinary.
She's a female Sir Humphrey Appleby.
Where she's come from. In fact, she's served politicians who have only made England a worse place for them being here. So their judgment on who to appoint to this chamber is really not worth anything whatsoever.
No, it's not.
Also, the fact that when Keir Starmer's come in, we have Carmen Smith, a 28-year-old Plaid Cymru activist, so not Keir Starmer, appointed by Plaid Cymru to become the youngest member. This is after Charlotte Owens. And speaking to the BBC ahead of being formally introduced as a peer,
28
she acknowledged
years
she
old.
would be one of the very few members campaigning to put herself out of a job, saying...
She's in there as an agent saboteur. Bad enough it's a woman. But an agent saboteur woman who wants to scrap the House of Lords, the very house that she is a part of.
I fundamentally disagree with an unelected chamber, she says. Baroness Smith defends the process by which she was nominated, arguing it helps to improve the representation of women in the chamber that's 70% male. And it points out as well that Plaid Cymru is one of only two parties, along with the Greens, who can...
Oh dear Lord, look at that hair colour. Look at that unnatural red hair colour. Oh, that's awful. Gee, that, whoever that is, they've got no business being in the House of Lords. Not with that hair colour. And not with those problematic wokey glasses.
So again, just fine, this is what they're taking away, but are they replacing it with anything that actually seems to be an improvement?
It's worth pointing out as well that all the hereditary peers that have been removed were men.
Yeah.
Which
funny how that works.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Lord
That's
Ahmed
funny how
as
that
well,
works.
Obviously in jail now, disgraced peer, because he was convicted in 2022 of trying to rape a young girl and sexually assault a boy under 11.
Wow. Someone with the name Ahmed. And they're getting a bit rapey. And they just so happen to be in the House of Lords. I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you. Well, not that shocked. What the hell did I just hear? Yeah. Disgraced Lord Ahmed. Jailed because, apparently tried to rape young girls. Which, I guess you can have a peerage, and it still doesn't stop the savage behavior of where he's from. Yeah, sounds very grapey indeed. Obviously, a good dozen beads were sacrificed to her scalp, yeah. like babies to the idol Moloch.
When he was a teenager in South Yorkshire. And so, okay, these kinds of people are just being appointed into the Lords as well. Obviously, highest profile, Peter Mandelson.
No, look at
As
that.
well. David Cameron just being made
Steps
a Lord.
down from the House of Lords, and yet he still has the title. Sounds like we need to finish the job and strip him of the title.
So we can get back into, Rishi Sunak's government and on and on. So the entire thing is entirely incestuous. It has become such a corrupt house of government, and the entirety of it is a farce. But I really wanted to end with this as well, because there is another aspect here which I do think requires a little bit more nuance, and it's one of the reasons why, for all of my instincts, and I am a traditionalist, and I do get very I don't always kick and scream about it, but on an emotional level, the culture war stuff does really irritate me. It's awful to see your country
it irritates us all,
just day in, day out, with a little part of what made it so special just taken away, but piece by piece, by people who have absolutely no care for it. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up was this article here by NPR, because this was absolutely fascinating. So you can see that this was from 3 days ago,
That's
in
still
light
an
of the
operation?
recent changes that are being made to the Lords.
That is a
And
miracle.
as it says, the end of an era, the UK abolishes aristocrats' right to inherit Parliament seats, and the article specifically focuses in on Charles Courtenay. Now, anyone who knows their medieval history will know that the Courtenays were a very, very powerful and influential family in medieval English politics.
19th Earl of Devon.
Right, but this is a man who has a family of deep lineage and ties to England, to our history, so much so that he is now the 19th Earl of Devon, which is obviously a pretty remarkable number of generations.
I also know Powderham Castle quite well.
Yeah, you've been there yourself. Mm-hmm. It looks wonderful.
Yeah.
Beautiful structure.
The seats of the aristocracy are always the most beautiful parts, most beautiful buildings at the very least in the country.
Yeah.
And the fact that their decline has resulted in them having to sell them off and commercialise them and things like that is quite sad, because many of them are in disrepair. But
historical homes just falling to rot, and the ones that aren't falling to rot are turned into hotels, bed and breakfasts, resorts, museums. Which, I mean, I suppose there are worse fates. I mean, the things could just be allowed to rot away and collapse in upon themselves. But we have to remember so many of these were homes to families that had lived there for centuries. And it's all just going away. And a lot of it is by design, because especially in Britain, if you take away people's connection to the land like that, you strip away a part of the identity, and it's really about, it's just another way to enslave the population, to turn them all into serfs and slaves, to make them malleable and controllable by denying them any sort of identity with blood and soil. It is morally reprehensible. It's genocidal even, and diabolically evil, what's been allowed to happen to my people.
This is a tangent, I'm sorry.
No, it's actually very relevant, in fact, because as it goes on to say, look, he's very aware of his whole family history and everything. He talks about the English Civil War, he talks about sieges that the castle has been through, and it goes on to say, in some ways, Courtenay, and this is the article itself, in some ways, Courtenay is a stereotypical lord. White, male, went to Eton College and Cambridge University.
Oh no, white and male and went to Eton and Cambridge. We can't have that now, can we? That's so evil and so wrong. Yet another reason, chat. They hate us and they want us dead. Just because we're white and male and straight.
Lives in a castle, but in other ways he's different. He's lobbied to change rules of male primogeniture to allow women, like his sisters, to inherit titles. In 2013, laws of succession were changed for the royal family, but the rest of the aristocracy still favours sons over daughters, and this is now quoting him personally. The patriarchy puts up a lot of barriers to its removal, Courtney told NPR.
So he's complicit in his own destruction. That's what I'm getting out of those quotations. He's complicit in his own destruction. I remember looking at castles being sold around Europe 10 years ago. Ireland and Bulgaria, Romania had the largest amount of castles for sale at the lowest end of the market, below 50,000 euros. Now, some of these places, they can be picked up for a song, but they're probably in horrendous condition. Only some ruins in Italy I remember being available at lower prices. I don't believe that. Don't think I'd want to deal with Italian real estate and estate agents, though.
On a tour of his castle. After one of his ancestors, William Kitty, Courtney was exiled for being gay. Courtney has restored Kitty's portrait to prominence at Powderham Castle, and he markets the castle as a venue for LGBTQ weddings now and pop concerts. In 2016, the castle hosted a big BBC music festival, hosting Coldplay.
Oh, he doesn't want the heat and attention by not towing the line. I think most people would not know who Lord Devon is. He could probably just live a fairly quiet existence, and nobody would know or care about him or anything that he had to say. The fact that he's doing all of this, this doesn't sound like towing the line. This sounds more like he's on board and complicit with his own destruction and the destruction of his peers, and even the destruction of his nation. This is just, it's sad and it's disgusting. 19 generations of Courtneys. 19 people to bear the title of Lord Devon. And this is what it's come to. His ancestors would be so ashamed of him. I'm sure even some of them would want to just wring his full neck. And deservedly so. Most of the properties were without heat or water or anything. Yeah, they would be quite the project. Probably spending more than 50,000 euros just trying to get the whole place up to code.
Mumford & Sons and Stormzy, that great British patriot.
Remember that happening, yeah.
Last year, Courtney stood on the floor of the House of Lords calling the chamber itself gendered and discriminatory. The title Lord...
Have you ever heard of a more loud and prominent case of affluenza than that? It's been a while since I've seen someone so unironically be so self-loathing like that. This is just pathetic. This is who bears the title of Lord Devon. The House of Courtney deserves so much better. At this rate, he might as well hand off the title to one of his sisters. They could probably do a damn sight better job than he ever could. It do be like that, Mr. Exworth. Welcome in, Creamsicle.
A lawmaker is out of touch. He said urging Parliament to step away from the negative associations with nobility and high rank associated with land and power. Courtney says he's using his privilege for social change. And then, quote, obviously, I'm a man of a certain age with a title who lives in the castle, went to private school and Cambridge University, but I've sought to break out of that stereotype because if you really believe in equal rights, what on earth am I doing? And Courtney opposed the elimination of his hereditary seat, but he accepts the outcome.
He's a stain on the county of Devon, my home county.
Oh man, well said.
You have this wonderful lineage in one of the most...
Yeah, Lord Devon, you're an absolute disgrace.
There's beautiful counties in the country. You're throwing it all away to virtue signal.
Says, I wish I could do more, but my time is up.
No, your time is up, mate. And we could actually We can actually do with you doing less. Do less, please. A lot less. Do nothing at all. That would be an improvement over what you've been doing.
And this is really why the reason I wanted to read this article as well is not only because I, as a pleb, can sit here on the other side and say, gosh, isn't it destructive what's being done to the hereditary peerage? But
yes,
what does it even matter what the opinion of the majority of people, just going back to the poll, is, because obviously it's not everything is governed by mass consent in Britain. We know that because we've had unnumbered decades of mass migration. So it's not exactly as if elites can't maintain things that they want to maintain with enough power and backing. But fundamentally, what this article draws into point of order is that the will has simply been lost to maintain the system. The entirety of the British, I use him anecdotally, but we know it will be,
Europe and England, they've largely lost the will to live. They've largely lost the will to live, and it's sad. I mean, it seems so foreign to me. I believe everyone has a right to a certain measure of pride in who they are and where they've come from. The idea of being so ashamed of who you are and where you've come from that you just want to self-immolate your entire society, that is alien to me. It always has been. And we know a lot of the reasons of why and how we got here. It's a matter of turning the ship around with the help of the younger generations. I have confidence that the young people in America can do it. I'm not so sure about England or about Europe. Some European countries, maybe, but mostly in Central and Eastern Europe, I would say possibilities are stronger there. I really don't know. I really don't know anymore. And it is really sad to say that and to realize that.
More pervasive than just this one man. The entire will to maintain itself, all of the arguments, the old traditionalist arguments of hierarchy and of elitism and the lords and aristocracy and kingship, all of these things have fallen away. And now,
what about just the simple reason of because we can, damn it? What about that? Isn't that enough? Isn't that sufficient? How about just because we can, and because we can do it as a fuck you to anyone who says we can't? How about just because we can, because it is good, just, true, and right? Start with that, build out from there. Poland and Hungary are shining jewels compared to here. They are lovely countries with people who have not lost the will to live, who know what it's like to live under the oppressive yoke of communism and under genuine authoritarianism. Those are two countries in particular that still have the will to live. Czechia, Slovenia, Slovakia, Croatia, Montenegro to a lesser degree, with a focus on tourism and safety. Yeah, Montenegro has really surprised me. A European backwater at one point, and now it's become almost a garden paradise. I actually knew a chap who relocated from America to Montenegro. He's actually been doing rather well for himself. Met with a lot of influential business people. And I sort of told him when he had to leave America, I was like, you can go anywhere in the world you want to. And there's a lot of opportunities out there in other parts of the world, former Soviet territories, where people have not lost the will to live on a societal scale, and they actually want to build something, build a better life for themselves, enrich themselves. I told him, you can do the same. Go there, go out there, see the world. And he did. And he's doing really well for himself. In some ways, I'm kind of jealous, because he's doing a hell of a lot better than I am. Dissolve the EU, SSR. Yes, the EU has got to go. It's a supranational body that just serves no purpose other than to hold the EU, to hold Europe back. And Europe is in danger of just disappearing under their yoke. Beautiful nature, beautiful old cities, right across from Italy. They import some great food. I'm told the food over there is excellent. And absolutely dirt cheap, too. Albania and Kosovo being right across the border, however, is concerning. That and the amount of migrants going through nearby Italy and Greece. As long as Montenegro has the good sense to keep the doors shut tight, only letting in the right people, they've still got a chance.
Now, there is no real distinction between those times back when the Liberals were trying to obviously get rid of all of those Tory lords back in 1911. That trajectory was set right then. And from that moment on to where we are now, this was the natural end state of where all of it was going to go.
I think it's the long shadow of the two world wars where we started to lose confidence in ourselves.
Yeah.
Obviously, the aristocrats, particularly.
Because Hitler and the Nazis were not allowed to have proper countries anymore, and we're supposed to feel bad about who we are, a lot of that can only be undone once enough of the older generations die off. It's just sad but true. Because there's some of the people that are fighting it so hard right now. The EU exists to fulfill the dreams of Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi and his plans for the ethnic destruction of Western and Eastern civilization so that future peoples there would have no claims. Yeah, the Kalergi plan is a real thing. The blood on the hands of the Europeans is but a drop in the bloodbath of the... I don't think I can read off the rest of that Kalergi, but yes. But if they would like to cry that we achieved more with less bloodshed, let them. On either land or history and can be ruled over by a small select class of rootless internationalist clique with nowhere that is called homeland, but who are at home in London, Geneva, Brussels, and New York. Yeah, at this point, I hate to say anything negative about the city of London, but I think the world would be a better place if London went back to being sort of a backwater trading post, like it started out being. Geneva? Yeah, we can probably do without the whole Babylonian finance system that exists there. And they just need to go back to making chocolate and cuckoo clocks. Brussels and New York, at this point, you could probably just nuke them from orbit and the world would be better off. I remember being introduced to it by monarchists 15-ish years ago. Monarchists and libertarians, I wonder where they are politically now. Libertarians in obscurity, no doubt, unless they did the whole libertarian to alt-right pipeline. Monarchists, well, I mean, they're monarchists. They've always been monarchists. And probably just have increased in number recently because so many people realizing that democratic forms of government just kind of don't work. And they haven't for some time.
The First World War were heavily affected by that. And I think that...
disproportionately died.
Yeah, exactly. And so it would be nice to have people who were confident in our ability to govern ourselves and our way of governing ourselves. This self-doubt and self-criticism is not the language of a strong country.
No, it's not healthy.
Given the opportunity to serve his country, that this lord in particular just decided to be like everyone else, to just follow the fads and phases that were just flung at us
became an
this year and
NPC.
next year. And there's no sense
The
of
NPC lord.
solidity in it. There's no sense of perseverance or preserving or just will to continue. So the entirety of the thing, of course, and I just want to end with this, the deep irony of all of this is that, well, the House of Lords is a problem because it's a hereditary peerage and it's deeply undemocratic. It doesn't allow for enough social mobility. We need to change all of this so we can put in our party cronies who will just yes men any legislation that we're happy to say. And all of this naturally has to be signed off by royal assent, by the king himself. And so there is a natural end state to where all of this line of thinking goes. And I have...
And it has. His Majesty has signed off on it. We are really not ruled by the best. The ruling class never sent their best, and the people suffer as a result. Mimiki, welcome in. Is this the Lotus Eaters? Yes, a segment from one of their previous podcasts from earlier in the week, talking about the elimination of hereditary peers in the House of Lords. London, Paris, New York, all once great cities that represented their people. Now they're the bones of what they once were and were filled with garbage. Yes. Especially the streets of Paris, my goodness. Back then it wasn't politically outrageous to discuss, probably because it was so unheard of before the migrant crisis of 2014 onwards. I live in one of them. I hate what it has become. Surreal to think it was once the gem of the world, yes. Also, hi Rex, hello. Might have to leave at some point, but I plan on reclaiming it. Do what you must, Kalergi. We all have to do what we must to survive and to thrive. A friend from the Netherlands loves the Lotus Eaters podcast. It, to me, is one of the few reliable sources I have to find out what's going on back in the old country. So, useful in that regard. And definitely without a lot of the sensationalism that you'll find with other outlets. Like, I like GB News on occasion, but even they do the whole sensationalist legacy media thing a bit too much. There's only so much of that I can take. Also, not really fond of the fact that they are pretty much in the tank for reform. And we've seen what a terrible joke that party has turned into. They don't really have a whole lot of nice things to say about Restore Britain, which right now may very well be the last best hope for the UK. So, yeah, sad state of affairs with British media, unfortunately. But, yeah, one of the few outlets that I can trust. Oh gosh, New York is in such a sad state. Yeah, many of the major cities are in a bad way around the world. Except El Salvador, which we saw earlier, has been just cleaned up, and their major cities have just been turned into paradise from the looks of it. Liked him better as Crown Prince, when his most controversial things in his career was his opinions on modern art and architecture. Charles III, to his credit, he and I are of one accord on the absolute state of architecture. His whole project there with Panbury, I love that. I think more cities and townships in England and across Scotland and Wales and everywhere else need to be like that. Emphasis on beauty, emphasis on classical architecture, providing that good sort of balance between, yes, you need a place to park your car, but also encouraging walking and a lot of foot traffic. But it also needs to be affordable. It needs to be something that not just the upper classes, but also the middle and the working classes can have access to in terms of home ownership. I think I still have his book, A Vision for Britain, where it talks about a lot of this. That's actually a fairly decent read. I need to finish it, though. His speeches on the matter and his efforts from out of his own pocket on his land in the forms of traditional towns built with local labour and locally sourced material was something I could actually agree upon in terms of actions compared to the things he's involved in now. That was one thing he really got right. Which just goes to show you, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Yeah, Poundbury being the crown jewel of those achievements, yes. Poundbury, beautiful place. Absolutely beautiful place. Wish we were doing that here in Denmark rather than tearing down historical city areas and building workers' apartments using Eastern European labour employed by American companies. Yeah, and quite often taking the form of what looks like old Soviet block housing. It's just depressing. There's far too much of that. And the only real reason they do that these days, on the practical level, is just because it's cheap and it goes up quicker. But it doesn't last. It's ugly. And it actually just starts to depress the people in the area around there, not just psychologically, but it can also depress them financially and, turn a once respectable neighborhood into a ghetto.
Deep grievances with the current royal family, and in particular, if he gives assent to the crime and policing bill that has that amendment in it about abortion. And there's something I'd like to speak more on another time, I think. But for now, you just get the point that, sure, it's a great act of cultural vandalism, but everyone in the country has kind of given up on the will to preserve it. And even those who were most privileged by it don't even agree with having that privilege in the first place. So naturally, the whole thing was going to wither and die.
Unfortunately. All right, we gave that a like. Copy the link. We'll drop that into the chats here for everybody.